We continue to follow the latest on the arrest of a man from the Berkshires accused of posting threats online directed at the president. Thanks for joining us for Western Mass News at 10 on Fox 6. I'm Amanda Martin Ryan. Our reporter Addie Patterson joins us live in studio after learning more about the federal charges he is facing. So Addie, what's the latest on this front?
Yeah, that's right, Amanda. 45-year-old Andrew Emerald of Great Barrington remains in custody tonight as he faces 8 counts of interstate transmission of threatening communications, a federal crime. We spoke with a local defense attorney today who explains what exactly these charges mean and what's next in court.
We're going to kill Trump on public television so the world sees what we do to monsters. If Trump is not dead by 2026, I'm going to Mar-a-Lago and I'm going after myself. That's just one of the threatening posts 45-year-old Andrew Emerald of Great Barrington made online aimed at President Donald Trump. After his arrest Wednesday, Western Mass News turned to defense attorney Jared Olenoff for his outside perspective on the case.
The judges, especially in federal court, is going to have a ton of different factors to look at.
Federal prosecutors say Emerald posted multiple others on his Facebook over the span of several months from May through July of 2025.
Based on reading it in its context, it does look to be politically motivated. You know, that being said, it doesn't necessarily make it protected speech.
Western Mass News found Emerald's Facebook account, which is still currently active with photos of him and several of the posts in question still publicly visible. According to court documents, agents arrested Emerald early Wednesday morning at his home. He initially refused to come outside and at one point appeared holding a long sword before eventually surrendering after negotiations with police. Court filings include Emerald's post referencing a sword along with photos of multiple blades and daggers investigators recovered from the home. Emerald made his first appearance in Springfield federal court Wednesday afternoon where he pleaded not guilty. A federal grand jury indicted him on 8 counts of interstate transmission of threatening communications, each count carrying up to 5 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a $250,000 fine.
A lot's going to depend on him as an individual. Okay, on the defendant's prior criminal record, if there is any, other factors in the case.
Olenoff also weighing in on what Emerald's defense team may argue in court.
I would imagine that his attorney would argue that, you know, look, this is borderline political speech, but is not necessarily covered by the First Amendment, but still he never intended to carry it out, and that he was going through possibly some things personally that caused him to act out his anger in this way with these posts.
Court documents also show that in 2018, Emerald was contacted by the Secret Service over allegedly threatening posts and later signed paperwork acknowledging he would be barred from buying or possessing firearms. Emerald is due back in court April 6 for a detention hearing. Reporting live in studio, Addie Patterson, Western Mass.